My name's Ian Bennett from Ordnance Survey, and welcome to this webinar on using Ordnance Survey Master on highways with RouteSmart for waste management. I'm pleased to say we're joined this morning by Stuart Henshaw from Integrated Skills, who will be talking about how their software RouteSmart supports highways. We'll have a time for questions and answers at the end of the session, so if you can pop your questions in the question window, and then we will answer them at the end. So the aim of the webinar is to go through highways, and just to reiterate that ITN has now been withdrawn, the OS Master Integrated Transport Network, and although will be available for download for a short period under PSMA, that anybody using ITN and wants to have continued updates and a fresh data set should move to using OS Master of Highways. And this webinar is all about looking at how that data can underpin waste management, how our local authorities are currently using ITN and may have moved over to highways, and RouteSmart will go through the benefits of that and some use cases that they've captured. So very quickly, I've got a couple of poll questions. So they should be on your screens now. So the first one is, how many of you currently use OS Master of Highways? So a couple of more people to vote, and then I'll close the poll. So thank you for that. So it looks like sort of the majority of you, there's still about a third of you who don't use highways. And if you want to have a conversation with us about that, we're more than happy to do that. And I hope you learned something today about highways if you don't know anything about it, and we're happy to work with you. So my second question, just to understand whether any of you are RouteSmart users. So anybody else still not voted? We're going to close the poll in a second. So it looks like the majority of you are. There's just 10% of you that aren't using RouteSmart. So you probably all know about the software. And as I say, Stuart is joining us and will be able to answer questions that are specific to RouteSmart. So thank you very much. So just to move on with an overview of OS Master App Highways. The story about highways is very similar to the one in which we created addressing. So we're working with GeoPlace, and we're taking the local authority gazetteer data, Highways England gazetteer data, matching that to our data store from which we used to produce ITN, and we're now producing highways to produce the highways data set. And that gives us two data sets, one aimed at asset management and one at a routable network. We're also pulling in third-party data. We're working with a third party on speed data, which is available through our partner network. The highways family is made up of three products. The roads data, which is your road centre lines with the streets information as well, which is coming from the gazetteer. Then we have the roads with routing and asset information. That's the same data that's in the road data set, so you don't need to order both. You can have one or the other. But in there as well is information on how the street is maintained, and then the information you need for routing, such as one-way streets and no turns. And we also then have a third data set, which is the urban path network. So that's in urban areas greater than 5 km squared. That's the network of paths that link the road network together, not where paths run alongside roads, because of the way we've modelled it, and we can talk about that. If people want to have a conversation with us about that, we can talk about that in more detail on a one-to-one basis. So please feel free to get in touch with us. So here are the different elements of highways. We start with the roads data, and in there we have the road links, the road nodes, and the ferry links. And then, as I say, the street data. At the end, there's some interesting information. The T10 is the European network, so the European routes that cut across the country, connecting various ports, so say from Dover to Holyhead. And then we have an open roads lookup table, which allows you to connect the highways data, anything captured in the highways data, to a TOID, to the open roads data. So if you capture something at the highways and you want to publish it in an open way, you can push that back onto open roads using that lookup. Then in addition to that, in the roads and asset management data, we have the information that you need to know when you're driving your car. So where the access restrictions are, turn restrictions, which restrictions of vehicles, and then other stuff that you might want to avoid, like hazards like fords and bridges in structures. And then the information on the maintenance that comes through from local authorities. So who's responsible for maintaining the highway? What you need to do to reinstate it if you dig up the highway, and then this special designation and highways dedication information. So that's around restrictions on work on the highway, and actually is the highway dedicated for specific use like a bridleway or a public right of way. Then finally the path data, which is your path centre lines, your path links, your path nodes, and the ferry data, and a very similar structure to the other data sets. Very briefly, I'm going to throw up a couple of slides before I hand over to Stuart on the relational model. It is all very much built around IDs. If it's coming from Ordnance Survey, this will be a TOID, so it'll be a number with OSGB in front of it. If it's coming from the local authority gazetteer, it will be a USRN. In the GML, it's all referred to as a GML ID. In some translations, they get pulled out and you can change the name to TOID or USRN, depending on how you're using it. All centered around the road link, and as I say, all links on the various different IDs, and you can build relational tables to join it all together. And also there's a link back to the topographic area known as master map through the related area TOID, so you can understand actually which part of topo, which polygon this road link relates to. Similarly with the routing information, that all links back into the road link or the road node using elements, which would be a list of the road links or the road nodes that restriction applies to, and the same with the street. So you get multiple references because you may have more than one feature relating back to a road link, a road node, or a street. And again, the same sort of structure with the path link. Again, all the unique IDs, so all the TOID or USRN in the background, which you can join the information together on. And all these things are unique and they're persistent, and the TOIDs in highways match the TOIDs in the old ITN data. It is in essence the same data. It's coming from the same data store, so the TOIDs are persistent between the two. So that's the end of my introductory slides. I hope they were useful. What I'm going to do now is hand over to Stuart, who's going to present to you on integrated skills and how they support the highways network. Stuart, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian. Thanks very much for the invitation to present here. I'm going to talk a little bit about RouteSmart and OS Highways for Waste Management, the work we've been doing over the past year and a half, integrating or providing our clients with the ability to use the new highways network. Just a little bit about us. There is always a question about who are integrated skills and how do they relate to RouteSmart? Well, integrated skills we are a waste management company that's been going since 1993, but in the past 10 years we've become best known really for our route optimization and work with a piece of software called RouteSmart Technologies. So RouteSmart is the software, the company that provide it is integrated skills. Key to our work is our partnerships with the originators of the RouteSmart software, but also with OS. We've been working with Ordnance Survey for many years. Obviously, previously, the ITN layer has been a key element to providing a RouteSmart solution, and so it's been important that we've been working hard on this, integrating the new highways network. And also, we work very closely with Esri. RouteSmart is actually an extension to the ArcGIS product. So a little bit about what we're going to try and cover today in today's session. So a little bit about who we are, integrated skills, what is route optimization for waste management, a little bit about that. And to say really that right from the start, there are really only 3 layers needed to actually run some route optimization from our point of view. The first one is the streets layer, which we're talking about today. The second layer are service locations, so the service addresses, and that can be either from the LLPG or the corporate address gazetteer, and that's we can use that either as a flat file or in the DTF format. And the third layer, the key layer, is the facilities. So where are vehicles starting from, and where do they need to be visiting to tip off and take their recycle it to. So those are the three key layers we'll be talking about. I'd like to touch on what elements of a project, typical project outcomes, and then say a little bit about our importer for highways data, and then something about a new tool that we've developed for merging, picking up on what Ian was saying earlier on, the paths network. So in many cases, we find that some of our clients actually want to merge their highways data with their paths data for certain services, and so we've now produced a tool that we can actually merge those. I'll say a little bit about that further. Could I just say a little bit about RouteSmart? We work with a company called RouteSmart Inc., who developed RouteSmart in the States. It's probably the world's best-selling high-density route optimization software with over 2,000 clients. We also are developers ourselves, so we've developed some wraparound solutions which link and effectively wrap around RouteSmart. One is Navigator, our in-cab solution, and Fusion, our back office system, and I'll show you a little glimpse of those as we go through. But to say that you know, we've got an interesting relationship with RouteSmart now, very, very positive relationship, where they actually are reselling our in-cab and back office systems in the United States, and we're selling their software over here in Europe. We've got over 100 UK local authority clients now, so you know, significant amount of the UK is covered by routes or streets that are routed using RouteSmart. We have over 2,000 clients worldwide using RouteSmart, so it's fairly large. In the UK, we've provided over 200 route optimization projects, and we are, let me just, if I can move that, so we're providing what we think is the largest route optimization project in Europe. This was in the northeast of England, and this was a report provided by local partnerships. It's a couple of years ago now, but actually they evaluated the project and actually found that they were very positive about it, but saying that they saw that it was producing around about £9 million worth of savings per year. So if you're kind of questioning whether route optimization can provide you with any efficiencies or savings, then that's probably a good report to have a look at. That's available. It's on the web. Delivering waste efficiencies in the northeast. And summing that up, we are using RouteSmart. Around about 25% of the UK's network have routes, whether they are waste management routes, street cleansing routes, winter maintenance routes. Around 25% of the UK streets are using RouteSmart software. And here's just a glimpse of a few of our clients. You may see yourselves on there, you may not, but to say we couldn't get all 100 on there, so this is just a sample of some of our clients. So a little bit then moving to the OS Highways data. What we've done is to create a custom importer to import the streets data for use within RouteSmart for ArcGIS. So some new attributes within the highways data that is really very helpful when it comes to waste management would be road widths. Why is that important? Well, in the background there, we've got a slide of the Shambles in York, which many of you may know, but it's a tiny old medieval street, and clearly there streets like that. You know, the fact that we can know the road widths, then actually at a very high level, we can actually look at which streets are appropriate for certain vehicle sizes to access. So, you know, that's something that we've had to kind of work around in the past, but now we've got road widths, and those kind of things can be planned within RouteSmart at a very high level. Gradient information. I'll just sort of show you. This is a slide from North Yorkshire. Obviously, a very steep hill here with the bins lined up for service, but the fact that we can actually get gradient information means that we can identify where there are steep hills, and obviously it's a important factor when you're trying to pick up wheel bins from very steep hills from a health and safety point of view. Another couple of things. The USRN information, for those of you who use USRN, RootSmart isn't dependent on USRN, but sometimes when we're importing data, it comes in USRN format, and it's quite helpful to know that now we can actually use that format to join data to prepare it ready for RootSmart. And so, as I say, it's now the Highways data now fully compatible with RootSmart and our back office and our in-cab solutions. Just to say a little bit about what we've done and how an example of how we've integrated the Highways data. So we would look at some of those fairly high-level data fields. So, for example, we're taking from Highways data this function here, this characteristic road function here. So we're actually, for example, here in this case, we're choosing what our importer's doing is looking at the road function and seeing that this is an A road. And you'll see all the A roads on this particular piece of map here highlighted. So we're identifying that it's an A road. We're then looking at the form of way, which again is provided through the Highways data. We're seeing that that is actually a dual carriageway in this case. And then what we're doing is we're amalgamating those two together to come up with a street attribute. So we've got here some class codes A through to G, which are an amalgamation of those two sets of data, which allows us to provide what we think is an estimated driving speed. One is a driving speed, how quickly would that vehicle typically drive along that particular street, and then we've got in the next column there an estimated service speed. So when those vehicles are working, well, how fast would we expect them to be actually servicing along that particular street? Just an example of how we've taken that data, those two fields from the new Highways layer, and made them into a really usable set of attributes within RootSmart. A little bit about RootSmart, route optimization software. As I mentioned earlier on, this is an extension to ArcGIS. Here you see the user interface. So we're importing those three layers that I talked about earlier on. We're talking about the streets, the service points, so LLPG, and then the facilities layer. We're bringing those three in, and we very quickly we can actually start to generate some routes. What we find that many of our clients, and what we would encourage them to do, is before you do any detailed routing, before you actually get anything out on paper, that you would actually use the ability within the software to actually do some options modeling. And we've spoken to a number of our clients who actually, in the light of the new government resources and waste strategy, are actually very focused on this idea of, okay, let's use RootSmart to actually do to model some options before we actually do anything, we make any definite decisions. You know, and I talk about the ability to use the software in the privacy of your own office to look at sort of various models and options before you actually decide what the services you're going to provide out there. So what does RootSmart do? Very straightforwardly, it allows you to actually reduce time and mileage to take out from your services non-productive time and travel. It allows you to increase your productivity, and we would expect around about 10 to 15%. If you've never done route optimization before, you would expect 10 to 15% improvement in your productivity levels. It also helps you to reduce your carbon footprint. So for every mile that you're taking, every vehicle that you're reducing mileage, you're obviously reducing carbon too. And there's the ability to report within RootSmart on your carbon, the carbon cost of sets of new routes. It allows you, importantly, to balance your workloads. So balancing workloads would be, for example, a rural route with perhaps a driver only, or a driver plus one loader would go out. They would go around the rural areas and probably tip at the facility probably only once during the day, and we would expect them to come in, to leave the depot and to come back into the depot exactly, well, around about the same time as you would have perhaps an urban route with a driver plus 2-3 loaders who might be tipping 2 or 3 times during that day. So it would balance those two types of work and bring them around at the same time. So it also helps you, as I mentioned, to model new scenarios. Let me just have a quick look. Very quickly, you can put in some those layers. You can put in some parameters to the software. Very quickly, you can actually get a route summary out, and you can get a high level map, which is telling you how long it's actually taking you in terms of travel, in terms of service, how long you're spending at the tip, how much time in breaks, what's the total time, and what's the total mileage, what's the total number of tips, etc., total tonnage. And here's just a few examples I want to run through very quickly. One example would be to just model, for example, the difference between managing your service in terms of crew territories. So giving a crew a territory and they work that through the week. So this is the two examples here, or a zonal collection where all vehicles are put into one zone in one particular day's work. So you're working around your authority area in day's work. And obviously there are other ways of splitting this up and breaking this up as well by region in relationship to your depots. The other type of thing you could do is look at a disposal site. So you can model very quickly what's the benefit of using two different, or three or four, an ultimate number of disposal sites. So you can look at and compare the stats once you've plugged in where your vehicles are all going to be traveling to. Obviously, we're adding in there all the travel time to get to those facilities, any change in facility time, turnaround time to get back into your work area. So you do that very quickly. Here's just an example of a table where people have actually been looking at modeling shift patterns within their service. You'll see at the top there, 4 day, 4 over 5 days, 4 over 6, 4 over 6, and 4 over 7. And very quickly you can actually look at, put together some costs within RouteSmart. You can put some costs in there, and it gives you very quickly you can get to a kind of modeled solution like that, where very quickly you can actually have a look at what might be the most effective option and look into that in more detail. I mentioned modeling new scenarios, but then optimizing resources. So evaluating the impact of different depots or facilities. We've had a quick look at that already. Importantly, as we see the development cycle kind of taking off again across the UK, and many of our clients are saying, they've got really quite high projections of new development and property growth over the next 3 years. Within the software, we can actually import those planned developments and run the software to see what the implications of that are on the software. Comparing different operational methodologies. So how are you going to actually do this? Is this going to be commingled? Is this going to be a curbside sort situation? So you can actually reflect that within the parameters in the software, the amount of service time taken for each, the amount of waste you might gather using each of those scenarios, and very quickly come up with a solution. Define fleet requirements. Many people have used the software to actually define how many vehicles they're going to need to purchase to provide a new service, for example. And although we haven't had as many clients doing this in the recent past, obviously there is a pressure to actually look at cross-boundary working opportunities with neighbouring authorities and to model joint working. So much of the modelling that's been done over the past years has actually been waste partnerships, actually looking at whether they could provide joint services more effectively and more efficiently than actually the individual authorities working within their own political boundaries. And then one of the other issues which has become more and more important recently is actually taking account of health and safety issues. So we have that new highways streets data. We can import within RouteSmart your route risk assessments into that streets network, which is then reflected and can be seen in the outputs from RouteSmart, and we can then, as a company, we've pulled that through into the in-cab device and the back office system. So you can see where all your health and safety route risks are in one screen effectively. A little bit about us. What do we do? We're providing route optimization. We're doing more of the wraparound services as well as just provide RouteSmart, but we're actually providing a navigator in-cab solution which picks up all of that valuable information we've got there on the streets network. It allows the drivers to actually use that bespoke network. This is not just an off-the-shelf network. This is your bespoke network that, taking the highways data, you've edited that, you've For example, you may have closed off streets which are no longer you feel safe for refuse collection vehicles to use. So that's the network that the driver's seeing through the in-cab device. The back office system allows you to look at what's been planned and also the progress of the route as it goes through the day. And a fourth quadrant in what we're doing is actually helping authorities to communicate with the public about what's happening as well. It's another growing piece of work for us. How does that look? Effectively, we've got the route optimization. We've got here exporting those routes out to the vehicles. In the back office, we've got the ability to look at those routes. We've also got the ability down at the bottom here to monitor the route performance. So the actual what's being planned within RouteSmart and what's actually being delivered, and to see the difference and to monitor the difference. And then as you see down the bottom right here, we've got public facing calendars. We've got access by your CRM to look at the progress, to look at what's planned and what's actually been performed. So you're dealing with some of those nitty-gritty frontline issues as to, where has my bin been collected today, and the ability for CRM staff to actually give a definitive answer. Yes, it has been, or it hasn't been, or there's been an issue with your particular bin or whatever. So it's taking the highways data right down to the sort of nitty-gritty frontline. I just wanted to give you a quick look at how this highways data pulls right through into the sort of front line, to give you a quick view of an in-cab device which is using that highways data. I just need to preface this with an apology that because of the technology we've got here and my video, I need to turn the volume up very loud. So I hope this isn't terribly distorted, but I just wanted you to see that actually what we're doing by pulling through the highways data in this form is actually then making that same street's data available and spoken out in some cases to the driver through our sat nav. So I'm going to turn my volume up very high. I hope this doesn't damage any of your speakers, but I won't say anything in the intermediary. I'll just let the video play for a while until I turn the volume back down again.
Yards, take the second right onto Quiet Street. In 50 yards, at Long Street, caution traffic coming. Assisted connection number 115 front of property. Caution traffic coming. In 200 yards, turn right onto Quiet Street. Turn right onto Quiet Street and collect both sides. Collect both sides. In 400 yards, take the third left onto King George Avenue. In 100 yards, at Quiet Street, caution school nearby. Multiple comments available. Caution school nearby. Collect both sides. Assisted connection number 141 front of property. Collect both sides. Take the second left onto in place and collect both sides, then go back.
Okay, so I hope you picked up the point there of the fact that we're taking this data, the highways data. We're actually adding in there the information that we know from the LLPG, so individual service addresses. Within RouteSmart, we can add in other parameters there. We can add in other information about, as we mentioned earlier on, either route risk assessments, which were then, you saw some of those spoken out and identified on the bottom of the screen for the driver, or you can add in there your assisted collections and many of our clients who are using the system are adding in their assisted collections and making those changes so that they're ready for the next time that service is run. Now looking at where this actually impacts on the back office solution, you'll see here we've got a back office system which we call Fusion, and we provide a live view of that, so you can actually see, here's a still from that, but you can see where the vehicles are using those streets, and in the still you can actually see the dotted line indicates parts of those routes that are actually being completed. Solid lines are where the work is still to be carried out. And on the left hand side there you can see where each of the vehicles is in terms of completion. You can see their percentage completion as they're going through the work during the day. A number of other features on Fusion which really is not related to today, but I wanted to just talk to you about how that information pulls through to the sort of front line. In terms of using the software to highlight the highways that have got special features put in there. So you'll see here, in this case, we're looking at a still again from Fusion, but we're seeing that Maywood Close has actually had within RouteSmart a route risk assessment element added to that street section. So here it's reversing. That will appear both in the back office but also in the in-cab device and spoken out to the driver. Usually that spoken instruction would be something like reversing maneuver on this street, or prepare for reversing maneuver, that kind of thing. Okay, let's talk about paths. Ian mentioned paths earlier on, and the new the paths network that's available. This has been available as a separate network, but many of our clients are actually, using these paths for many parts of their services. Here we have a street cleansing vehicle which is sweeping a footpath in a park, and up till now we've had no way of really integrating those paths into the streets network. And so those have had to be run as kind of two separate networks, a paths network and a streets network. And really what we've needed to do is to actually integrate those two, or allow our clients to integrate those two. So services like street cleansing, where you've got the micro sweepers and small sweepers who can now work on the main streets and work off on footpaths, can actually integrate and use both of those networks together. A couple of other examples. We've had a client recently who wanted to integrate their paths network specifically for the issue of weed treatment. So using quad bikes, they're going on the footpaths along highways, but also they're going through parks across other public open space. And for them, there's no difference between the streets or paths, and they just want an integrated network. And other examples would be the services that are actually filling grit bins, and grit bins can be all over, as we know, footpaths or on the street. So the whole requirement for to integrate these two networks of streets, the highways and paths, was something that's been raised for a while. So we've actually now been working on merging those two custom data sets into one layer. So I've mentioned this already, but actually for our clients to customize those two, bring those together, is actually quite a long-winded approach. So we've actually merged those two data sets and making those available to our clients if they want to use them. Okay, so let me just give you a quick example of this is an urban area. You can see here where the standard highways network is, and let's just overlay the paths network onto that. If we overlay the paths network, you can see there's this is in the context of weed clearance, and so here we are. Just go back again, the streets, and the network on top of that, which is the paths. So we have a paths network and linked to the highways network, and now we can create that as one single network that our clients can use. Just looking at a couple of examples of what we've done here. If I take this area here, we can see that we're joining this. This is the unnamed road. This is the footpath here, and what we're doing is actually making a connection. We're joining that with a new segment in here, which actually connects into the highways network. The other example I can show you here is where we've got a path that actually touches onto a street, and what we've done there is actually to split that street into 2 segments at that new node there, and give each of those sides of the street a new identity. So we're able to sort of both create links and also split the highway as well, which has been very useful for the clients who've actually used it so far. There we go. I've actually touched on that already. Let me just conclude. The OS Highways, from our point of view, brings new data to waste management services, and I mentioned earlier, just to recap, it gives the ability to actually look at a high level, this idea of what streets are suitable for different size of vehicles. That's really been a little bit of informed guesswork in the past, but now we can actually see those road widths and actually make decisions at high level based on those, which is really helpful. And also the ability to actually see gradient helps us to identify steep hills, which relates directly to route risks and the risk of providing services on those types of streets. Also provides links to USRNs. A little bit then in conclusion about what we've done. We've created this importer for the data for our software RouteSmart, which then, as I've shown you, is pulling that data through into Fusion and Navigator, and we think that this is all adding value for our clients. And then secondly, a second part of this is from what we've been doing recently is to create this bespoke merged network of highways and paths, and we feel that that's kind of fairly early days. We can see that there are some clear applications for that, such as street cleansing, and possibly weeding on paths networks. We're yet to see what other applications there may be for that network for our clients. I hope this has been helpful and look forward to any of your questions. Thank you.